Totally legit, 100% safe.
We have to hold the mic while we're talking?
Yeah, you gotta hold them.
You gotta hold the mic?
Yeah, you gotta hold the mic like this.
Okay.
That's the whole point. You got great audio that's right in front of your mouth, but you gotta hold the mic because I didn't bring in-car mic stands. Sorry.
We need like the headsets,
Like Taylor Swift would wear.
the pilot sets.
Jojo Siwa headset.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, welcome to the Nashville Money Guys podcast. I guess it's the Nashville Money Guys YouTube channel right now. I'm going up to Canada with my buddy Josh. You've seen Josh before. If you haven't seen his first interview, go back a couple of episodes, and we talked at my place for about an hour. It was an amazing conversation. So today, what I wanted to talk about while we're driving up to Canada to go bear hunting, we're about 100 miles from the border, is I want Josh to go into detail about the first real estate, like the first investment property that he bought. I want to hear the entire story in detail, and then I'll tell you the entire story of mine in detail as well. What we would do differently, what worked, and just kind of seeing if we can bring some knowledge from the very first deal that we ever did. Yeah, so I think this is the goal. So I was talking to a guy the other day, and I said, you need to go out and you need to make offers. And to me, what I was thinking in my mind was he needs to go knock on doors and he needs to write offers on people's houses. And he said, what is an offer? And I went, oh, we need to break this back to like first principles a little bit more. And so when you're talking about writing an offer, or when you're talking about how you did the first deal, that's why I say I want to go into detail, because like I used a realtor for my first deal. So I didn't actually write the offer up. I just told her the price, and then expected that she was going to be able to negotiate that and figure out that with the seller.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll prompt you at any point if I'm, whatever. If I want to dive deeper into something, I'll try to ask some specific questions.
Cool. Yeah. So the first house, first of all, I got really involved in the Nashville REN chapter at the beginning. And
REN is the Real Estate Investors Association, essentially. Like there's local clubs in most areas that have like just a bunch of people of varying different experiences. And if you are interested in real estate investing, you should absolutely go be a part of one of those groups.
Yeah. So I was very vulnerable, and I think that's what we talked about last time, Brandon. Like knowledge and data, those are all things that are out there and available right now. So you don't have to know it all at the beginning. And I'm very comfortable whenever I don't know something, just saying, hey, I don't know. So started asking questions. So at the local REN in Nashville there, just started asking how other people do the deals. Where do they find deals? How do you calculate a deal? What is a deal? A lot of times you see properties or things for sale and you don't even know how to analyze them. So there was a lady called Robin. Her name is Robin Thompson, and she came and spoke at the.
I love Robin Thompson.
She spoke, and she was just very kind of down to earth and talked about how at the beginning she would write letters to people. So in her terms, they were horsey letters because she lived in a place that was horse friendly. So she'd have like a watermark of the horse in the background, like 30% opaque. And she'd write letters using that, and the horse background would kind of connect to people. So I started in my mind formulating the approach or the tack that I was going to take on finding deals. And the easiest way was, where are the neighborhoods around me? What am I familiar with? Let me just start asking questions. Let me start asking people. So this will be a Nashville specific first deal. So in Nashville, I was working at the time in Cool Springs, and there was this area kind of east Nashville, close to the airport, that I was familiar with. I would drive back and forth on it all the time. So I saw houses there. I saw what was going on, and I started mailing letters I would handwrite the letters, and I would mail them to people where I saw that there was some type of distress or something going on with the property.
Okay, so let's dive into that more. So when you say, let's break it down into two parts. The first part is identifying the properties. Yep. So when you say people in distress, what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So a property that has grass that's knee high, letters in the mailbox. The mailbox is kind of stuffed full of mail or letters. It looks like somebody hasn't checked the mailbox in a month or so. Broken windows, cars that are on blocks, anything that looks kind of abandoned or not taken care of.
So this is physical defects in the actual house, and you're seeing these by driving the neighborhood?
Yep.
Makes total sense.
So neighborhoods I'm familiar with, looking for signs of something going on with the house itself. So writing letters to those specific, because if you have a kind of a pool of houses that you're looking at, the neighborhoods, you want to narrow that down to be a little more granular. So looking for homes that have some type of distress. And then I would mail letters. I would handwrite the letters. And this is the thing where a lot of people get stuck. They think, oh, I've got to send 5,000 letters, right? Or this neighborhood is hundreds of houses in there. Well, I was doing this while I was working. So every night I would come home, I would chunk it up. I'd say, I want to do 100 letters this week. Well, if you sit down and you try to write 100 letters, that is intimidating.
Yeah.
But what happens when you write 5 letters in the morning before you get up to go to work? 5 letters at night whenever you get home. 10 letters, same thing on the weekends. You can get to 100 letters really easy.
All right. So you were literally handwriting these letters to these people?
Yep.
Okay. Like with handwriting. You weren't typing it up?
Nope.
Okay. You were writing it because
just
you wanted them to read another human being's handwriting.
Yep.
Correct? Okay. So what were you putting in your letter? Do you remember?
Hey, it looks like something's going. Hey, my name's Josh. I'm, looking to buy some houses in your neighborhood. I saw that X, Y, and Z was going on with your property. For this one, I think, for example, this exact one, there was a lot of grass and there was something wrong with a vehicle there. Hey, I noticed there was some tall grass. Do you need help getting the grass cut? Saw that you have a vehicle look kind of abandoned. How can I help you?
Oh, so you were naming specific defects that you were finding in the house, but not being like mean about it, just saying, hey, is there something that I could do to help you with this situation, basically?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I would at the very end of the letter, I kept it like half a page. So at the very end, I'd say, if you want to sell your house, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Because I didn't want to be misleading. I want them to know what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that ultimately you may be willing to help them. Because I would imagine if somebody called and said, my husband's in the hospital and I need my grass mowed, you probably would have showed up with a mower and you would have mowed. Yeah, that's cool.
So on this one house specific, I got a phone call from a couple. The wife had called me and she had said, yeah, my husband just spent his retirement on this house and we have tenants in there and we were trying to make an investment decision and the tenants aren't paying any rent. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And at the time, I wasn't as familiar with dealing with tenants, but I was like, yeah, can we sit down and chat?
Okay, pause real quick. So it was the property that you physically saw turned out to be a rental property.
Yeah.
So when you're mailing the letter, you're not mailing it to that house. You're mailing to the address of the people who own the house.
Yep.
Which you found through the tax records, through a
realtor. You can do that really easy. So in Nashville specific, you just go to the property search, type in the address of the actual house that you're looking at, and then it'll have a secondary address, mailing address on that same record.
In like Nashville GIS or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So basically if you're not in Nashville and you're listening to this, more than likely, because I've searched this in quite a few areas, it may take you 10, 15 minutes. But there is likely an online, some sort of online thing that you can go click on that will bring up a lot of the property's details, when it sold last, how much it sold for. And then if it's owned by somebody who doesn't live there, there will be a separate mailing address that's associated with it. And that's how you can you're an investigator. So what you'd find is that property was owned by somebody who doesn't live there. Then you can you can go, okay, this is a rental property. I may approach this a little bit differently. So in that letter that you wrote, it's now going to the owner of the house because that's the actual mailing address, not the address of the actual house.
Yeah, and some of the things now, Brandon, there's a lot of technology there that could be help you be more efficient. So there's I think it's door knocker or something like that. Active knocker is one. You can actually drive around neighborhoods, pull up in front of a house, click it on the app, and it locks it in there for you. So then when you go back home, you know which properties you drove by, which ones you want to send letters to.
Door knocker or active knocker?
Yep, one of those
All
two.
right. Yeah, I'll put some links to those below. That sounds interesting. I haven't explored any of that stuff. When we were doing it, it was old school, like paying somebody $10 an hour to go drive around neighborhoods, and we taught them what to look for as far as distressed housing. Then they'd come back with a list on a yellow pad of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I very similar. When I drove around, I actually had a map, and I would kind of circle the houses I was looking at.
Yeah.
I'm a visual person, so looking at, are there any kind of similarities in certain neighborhoods, streets, that type of thing. So fast forward, go and actually have a conversation with the husband and wife of this property, and he is just defeated. You can see it on his face, man. Like he's just, they put their retirement, cashed out their 401ks and bought this property, and that they thought that they were going to be able to easily manage this and get, a return on their investment. So immediately just had a conversation. How can I help you? And I didn't even talk about, hey, let me buy it.
Right.
I said, how can I help you? So providing value and asking how you can help solve their current problem allows you to get into a mindset of understanding what their motivation is. And motivation is key, because if you understand the problem, you understand the motivation, then you can kind of put the puzzle together.
Okay, that's important. So what you're talking about is basically a sales technique of you're listening to them. You're not trying to impose what you want onto them. You are listening for a problem, and then you are trying to figure out a way to solve the problem.
Yeah.
That's super important. And I think there's a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, because it's nerve-wracking. But the truth is, if you sit down and you just have compassion for another human being and you start listening to them, you'll either figure out a way to buy the house because that's what they actually need, or you'll figure out a way to potentially be able to solve another problem for them. We've had lots of deals where we haven't bought the house, but we've done something else for the person. Simple things. I mean, sometimes more expensive things than I would have assumed we would have wanted to do, but it's always kind of paid us back, seemingly, like good karma type things, it seems like. Okay, all right. So you are listening as a problem solver. You are not trying to buy their house. You are listening.
Yeah, and I also went in with the expectation of, I'm not necessarily going to have a contract on this house that day. So it was really trying to add value, really trying to help them. And I genuinely did feel bad for them. I couldn't imagine, being at the end of my working career and then spend all my retirement savings for something and then it not work the way I expected. So I actually told them, hey, let me just go have a conversation with the tenants. So I went the next day. I knocked on the door with the tenants, and there was two sets of tenants. One was living up above, and then one was down below in the basement. I had conversations with both of those tenants. The ones upstairs had, some genuine excuses. They lost their job, they couldn't pay, and the one downstairs just said that they're not going to pay rent. They're in there, and they
just said, I'm in here, and I'm just not going to pay.
Yeah. And this is where the gentleman who owns the house, he didn't have strong systems, process, property manager. He was trying to manage that himself. So he went in trying to find tenants and manage the tenants without kind of any resources or knowledge of that. And he honestly just selected really bad tenants.
So I assume that he would have probably put like a for rent on Craigslist type thing, more than likely didn't do a background check on them.
Yeah.
Which, if you were going to be an independent landlord, you can do all that stuff. Like you can do all the things that a property management company does. There are companies that you can pay that will basically help process an application for a tenant for you, even if you're not using them as a property management company. Like they'll do a background check as long as the people approve and are giving you permission to run it. That's like a must.
Yeah,
like you
absolutely.
have to do that. And that's, to me, pretty common sense. Like you wouldn't want to do a handshake deal with somebody who can potentially cost you like tens of thousands of dollars if they decide to kind of damage the unit and then overstay.
Yeah.
Especially in landlord states where evictions take a lot longer. Like you're really having to trust somebody to do a handshake deal with them. So definitely getting a background check, even if it's through a third party. But truth is, just finding a good property management company that can stick a good tenant in there is probably the best way to go, because then it also frees you up to focus on finding the next deal and not just managing a rental.
Yeah.
All right, continue.
So conversation with both tenants. The following day, I go back over to the couple's house and I tell them what I discovered. The tenant below in the basement was not going to pay rent per his statement. The one above was dealing with some work issues. So then we just had the honest conversation. What's next? Like how do they solve that problem? And I said, you could probably hire an eviction attorney. I didn't know a lot at the time, but you can hire somebody to do eviction. Or I said, I've got, if you want to sell the house, I can take over and I can deal with it. And you guys can walk away and not have to think about it. And she immediately said yes.
Oh no.
And here again, I didn't even have a number in mind. I didn't know what the number should be, what it was going to be.
She was just done dealing with this problem.
Yeah.
Like she would rather take the money back and do something else with it.
Yeah.
That was what her mindset was. So you were solving a problem for her because you were creating more peace of mind by her saying, we are not landlords. Rental properties are not for us. Get, the heck with the cheese. Get me out of the trap thing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could tell the husband was just really there again. This conversation, he was really defeated. He felt embarrassed.
Yeah.
Because he had made a decision, for their family of putting in this situation. So, unknowingly, I asked a question which I now ask in every single time I try to buy a property. This was just a natural, instinctive question I asked. What is the least amount of money you would sell the house for? And they immediately already had that number in mind.
I think people assume that, like, even going back to one of the first things you said, where when you were writing your letter and you let the people know you were interested in buying their house, I think for some reason people think that you have to like wiggle your way onto the kitchen table with them, talking to them, and then you can kind of sneak that in somehow.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. You just have to tell them what your intentions are. And then same with this one, where you just go, what's the least amount of money that you're willing to take for the house? That's just a very logical question to ask. And it's honestly a very fair question to ask them, because you don't want to waste their time, and you don't want them wasting your time. And if they're way off, then you just probably put them in the follow-up category, and you just wait for Bubba that's living downstairs to continue to be a problem and not pay rent. Then you follow back up with them.
Yeah. So they automatically said $90,000. And here again, I didn't have like the formula created and, the exact number that I needed to get the house for, but from knowing and understanding that neighborhood, being familiar with the price that homes were selling in that neighborhood.
All right, explain that. How did you get familiar with what those houses are selling for? What are the metrics that you're looking for?
Yeah, so this was where I was driving around, looking at very particular neighborhoods. So knowing that I was handwriting the letters, I didn't want to just blast to everybody. I wanted to be very specific. What are the neighborhoods that I drive by, I'm familiar with, that I can kind of get intimate with, and then inside those neighborhoods, what are the homes that have issues or problems?
Okay, so you have kind of boundaries of like houses that are relatively similar in quality.
Yep.
So it's like a bunch of houses built in the 60s, 70s, or some, generation of houses. Like it's not like there's areas in East Nashville where you go drive down and there's like a row of gorgeous historic homes, and then right behind it's like a bunch of 50s, World War II asbestos sided houses.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be making the same offer as you would on, those beautiful streets as you would on the houses below. Mm-hmm. So the area that you're talking about, what was the typical like retail price of a house in that neighborhood?
Yeah, homes were going, cosmetically, livable condition 150 to 180.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That were-
so when you hear 90, you automatically go, okay, there's probably some room for this
Yeah.
to work, because there's $60,000 worth of spread from the bottom of the other houses that are retailing in that neighborhood.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
And the home was built in the 60s. I think it was 63 or 64. I later on down kind of my growth path, I figured out I only wanted to target homes that were 78 and newer, just for some, electrical plumbing type scenarios. But this one was built in 63, 64. I knew I could sell it for 150 to 180.
I like how we start podcasting and then the consistency of the shaking of the car just starts breaking everything. They won't be able to hear it because of the mics that we're using, but it's just very annoying. Like, I'm looking at the camera back there that's just doing this.
Yeah, so I said, awesome. How, do you want me to take over the property tomorrow? Do you want to, how much time can you give me? I didn't try to negotiate on the price. I felt like that was a very fair number that they gave.
Okay.
And I said, okay, let's get this deal done.
Oh no, camera's going. Camera in the back's going.
In the back?
Camera in the back's going.
Oh, man.
Let's jump back in.
Back to it?
Yeah.
90,000?
90,000.
I said, yeah, let's do it. And there was part of me that really felt bad for them, and that was why I didn't try to negotiate down.
Yeah, sure.
I probably could have said, okay, can we do 80 and let's do it. They probably would have said yes.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was reasonable. So 90,000, asked them, you want to do it tomorrow? What's your time? And they wanted to be out of the situation as quick as possible. So went back home, got online. I think it was before Bigger Pockets had some of their templates, but found a one-page contract to purchase real estate.
Okay, so you did not give them a piece of paper or anything. You guys just basically had talked about it, and then you agreed to a price just in person.
Yep.
So you didn't write down anything up till this point. Okay, got it.
I felt confident that nothing was going to happen between that conversation and the following day.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't do that now. I would be prepared, and I would have a contract anytime I go and talk to a potential seller. So,
but as somebody who's new, you did not have all your ducks in a row, and it still worked out.
It still did. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So came back the next day with a one-page, very basic, very simple. I had on there that I would go ahead and start dealing with the tenants as of that day of the contract, and that we would have 30 days to close on the property. But their main motivation was to not deal with the tenants.
Yeah.
And that was the problem I was helping them solve. So I committed to doing that. So 30 days to close the property. And I basically went and asked some friends and family and came up with $90,000.
Okay, so did you know that you were going to be able to raise the funds?
No, not at all.
Okay, you were just willing to go make an offer on something and then just see if you could figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. So rather than doing that, you should go to NashvilleMoneyGuys.com. We are a hard money lender based out of Nashville, Tennessee, but we serve the southeastern part of the United States. And literally, had Josh come to us with that deal, we would have looked at those numbers and we would have said, yes, we will give you a loan, not because Josh had experience or anything like that. And I know it's kind of an ad that I'm throwing out there, but legitimately, using something like hard money or what Josh did, private money, where he just talked to some friends and family and was able to come up with the dollars. Those are probably the two, that one and like partnering with somebody with money, that's probably the three ways that most people will start out, is my guess. Unless you're transferring from another job or you've got a bunch of money that you've made investing in other things and you want to diversify into real estate. But most people don't have any money. So having a little bit of an idea of how you're going to pay for it probably would embolden more people. So knowing that like NashvilleMoneyGuys.com, we're out there for you. There's plenty of other hard money lenders, private money. Like, was that intimidating for you raising that money?
No, and I mean, my personality, Brandon. I like to have everything already planned out, and I didn't have a plan for the financing, but I knew if I found a deal, I felt confident enough that I would figure out the rest.
Okay.
That was my singular focus, was to find the deal.
Yep.
And then figure it out.
Which makes sense because I'm sure that when you showed the people that invested with you the comparable sales, you were like, it will be very difficult for us to lose money on this deal, which is always other people's biggest concern is like, is there a potential for us to lose money? And when the comps are 150 to 180 on a 90K purchase.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I was working full time during this period as well. I was working 55 hours a week at a healthcare company. So I was playing double duty on the side. I knew I wanted to do real estate. So if you're trying to, the best way to jump into real estate is to play double duty, because you've got kind of that backup. Your primary income is still there. You're not trying to feed yourself off of what you're trying to grow. And for me, that really helped me. Absolutely. Because I didn't feel the pressure in terms of having to go and just make something work.
Yep.
Right. So that was key for my growth period. Fast forward, we ended up dealing with the tenants. I went to them and had some subsequent conversations in that 30-day period, and then found an article on doing cash for keys. So the tenant upstairs, I knew that they had, the work issue. I knew that they weren't going to be able to do anything. So I asked them, do you have a family member? Do you have somewhere else you can go and live? I'll give you $500 if you'll be out by this weekend.
So when you were doing research, you probably just literally Googled how to get tenants that aren't paying out of a house
without an eviction. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So all you did was just like think about what the problem was and then start asking Google. And I'm sure you probably Googled a bunch of different things. But the fact is you were willing to get in there and ask some questions.
Yeah.
And not just like whatever, assume that you were going to have to use an attorney to get them out.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. And the whole story of kind of like just what's helped me in life in general is those three pieces of information: knowledge, data, and action. What knowledge do I need? What does the data or the information say about that knowledge, and what actions am I going to take? So for that situation, I didn't have the knowledge. I went and found the knowledge, I found the data, and I took action on it. So I ended up getting those tenants out before we actually closed on the property. Then the tenants in the basement, not so much. That was more of a difficult situation.
All right, wait, pause. So the people that were upstairs, you probably said, I will give you $500 once all your stuff is out.
Yeah.
And then you will hand me keys.
Yeah.
Did you have like a certain level of cleanliness that you wanted the unit to be in? Or did you have that conversation?
I'd asked them to have all of their belongings out of
all of their belongings
the
out.
house.
And then you'd give them $500 if they did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I put a date and a time frame on that. And that I actually had them sign just a scrap sheet of paper that yes, that they were going to do that, and yes, I was going to give them $500.
Okay.
And it actually came time, that weekend came. I think it was noon on a Sunday. I asked them to be out. 11 a.m. on Sunday. We need more time.
Yeah. Probably very typical, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I said no.
Really?
Yeah. So I drove over to the house. They were still there. And I said, we agreed. I agreed to give you $500. You agreed to be out by noon. Your belongings are still in here. They literally grabbed their stuff and started throwing it in the driveway. They had goldfish that they were like throwing in the yard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was a weird situation.
Had they started moving anything?
They had a little bit of stuff moved out. Yeah.
Okay, so they had a destination that they were heading to. They were just, weren't doing what they said they were going to do, which that's also typically what we found. I'd say it's like 9 out of 10 people, unless there's a really weird circumstance, once people start getting behind, they just don't catch up. That's what I think.
Yeah. And I had experience in like my corporate career of managing people, dealing with certain personality styles, that type of thing. I knew in the back of my mind, I hadn't dealt with tenants a lot before this situation, but I knew that they had pushed over the prior landlord.
Right.
So I knew if I didn't have like a firm line in the sand,
yeah,
they were going to start pushing me over.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that's when we held firm, and they actually ended up getting all of their stuff out into the driveway by noon on Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is rare, and I think that is lucky.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the basement tenant. This was the person that he literally just said, I'm just not paying rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Freaking people like that.
Yeah. His name was Shane. So Shane was a repeat tenant that, took advantage of multiple landlords and was pretty upfront and honest about it. So when talked to Shane again, said, hey, here's what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? And just had to be very firm and very candid with the guy. So I said, I'm going to go hire an attorney to come and post an eviction notice on your property. And this is the route that's going to happen. Or you can do the same thing that the tenants above did, and I'll give you $500 to be out by next weekend. So after I had that second conversation with him, he ended up folding and saying, okay, he'll do it. Had a actually surprisingly better scenario with him because he actually got all of his stuff out by the following weekend. So,
no kidding.
Yeah.
That is lucky then.
I think it was knowing that the tenants upstairs did vacate. He knew that had happened. So he knew like he was next. Like there was no other option. It was
inevitable. He wasn't going to be able to push you over like he had been previous landlords.
Yeah.
So you're willing to like Josh is one of the sweetest guys I know, but you're willing to be confrontational. And I think that that's a rare skill set, to be honest. So how do you outsource that skill set if that's something that you're just not comfortable doing? Is it just safe to get straight into like an eviction attorney and just go that way or?
Yeah, I think they're against that knowledge data action piece. So if it's something you're not familiar with, go find someone who is very familiar with it. Go hire an eviction attorney. Go in the local investment meetup group and say, hey, who's really good at getting tenants out? If you don't know who is, you know somebody else that can help me. So that's, I think if you're not willing to be confrontational, yes, find somebody else, but also just get straight to the point. Don't beat around it. Don't waste time. Don't think about, oh, I don't feel like doing this. That's outside my comfort zone. If you know you got to get a tenant out of the property and they're not doing their duties to the lease, then you're not, just do it.
Yeah. It's inevitably going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So you may as well just go take the action. Like if you know that there's no other way out, then just go do it immediately. Like it's kind of like when you're going to break up with a girl. I was terrible about doing that, and I'd wait like 3 months longer, and it was awful. And those 3 months were terrible. It was just because, I should have just done it.
And there's so much growth in that because when you do it, you feel so liberated.
Yeah.
You feel like, I got that off my chest now. I can move on. So that frees you up to have time to go find more deals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think another thing that you could do is if you're at one of the RIN meetings and you have some strategies that you're interested in trying to deploy as far as getting tenants out, you can find somebody who's probably more experienced or find somebody who's at least just willing to go help do that. Because if it's literally just like door knocking the tenants and saying, hey, you're really taking advantage of my friend and we're going to evict you and we're going to come after you for what's behind. But you find somebody that's a little more like me or a little more like Josh that are willing to be confrontational in order to help somebody out. I'd say you can't get, the problem with tenants is if you get too rowdy, then it's harassment. So you just have to kind of have somebody that understands the boundaries. Or property management company. We'll let the property management company deal with them. Yeah. Although the cash for keys thing is probably something that rarely are they going to do that. Like that's probably rarely in their systems and processes.
Yeah.
A rear camera has fallen over again somehow.
But you want to keep going?
Yeah. Let's keep going.
Yeah. From the tenant's perspective, you can paint the picture of what are the options that are going to happen, right? And if you tell them, hey, I'm going to give you an option here. I'm going to give you a route that's easy for both of us. Or we can proceed the next route, which is going to cause, issues with your credit, issues with trying to get another place to live, all of those things. So painting the picture of all of the scenarios and then going back to the best scenario for them, that I've tend to find that really does kind of help.
Yeah, because this is just this freaking road. Dude made $500 in a week.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would have just filed for eviction, then he would have, he would have had to gone to court. It would have been a big deal. It would have been a big problem for him.
Yeah.
All right. So let's skip forward. So you now have a vacant unit. And how quickly after you got it under contract? Because you said that you were dealing with the tenants for the 30 days while you were waiting to close, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So you're waiting to close, and the tenants are both out by the time you actually close?
Yeah. So first weekend, so call that day 10. First set of tenants upstairs are out. Day 20, say, the next set of tenants are out. So I've got both sets of tenants out before the contract period's up.
That's awesome.
We actually close that following week, call it day 25. And, I had found enough people to pull money together to borrow cash for the $90,000 to then go and purchase the property. At the time, it was some family, private money, some friends. I think it was 3 or 4 people I had to go to actually come up with the $90,000. And, I was working a corporate career at the time, living paycheck to paycheck. So that was, to me, a very, very sizable amount of money I had to come up with. We ended up closing on the property. Me and another friend, we actually went in there and cleaned it all out. We did a lot of the work ourselves. We put a fresh coat of paint in both the upstairs and the downstairs. And then we had a friend, a relative of ours, list it. And we actually got, very, very quickly, got $175,000 on that property.
Wow. Okay, so you didn't keep it as a rental. You guys cleaned it up and then flipped it.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
Those are good margins.
Yeah, that was... to us, that was a home run. I mean, that was a really big deal. And we looked at what the margin was compared to our annual paycheck, and that really started getting the juices flowing.
Yeah.
For real estate.
You're like, all we have to do is one of these a month.
Yeah.
We're going to have a good time.
Yeah. So afterwards, we went back and just had a follow-up conversation with the husband and wife and said, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And they said, "Great. Thank you for helping us in that situation. We didn't tell you, but we actually purchased 3 properties at the time versus 1. So as part of their investment strategy, that was one of 3 properties that they had. And after I had solved their problem, they told me about the other 2. And long story short, I ended up buying the other 2 properties from that couple.
At similar discount?
Yeah.
Wow.
Very similar.
Man.
Yeah.
So they probably just wanted to see if you were going to do what you said you were going to do.
Probably.
And then when you did it, they were willing to come back, and man, that's awesome. So that's another good lesson, is following up with somebody in that scenario. I'm trying to remember if we've had that type of thing happen. You know what we have? We had one investor that we dealt with. We bought a certain number of duplexes off of him, and then later came back and bought some more off of him. Actually, now that I think about it, we've had multiple investors, which that makes sense. These folks are moving into the ends of their career, and they don't want to hassle with the houses anymore. They're doing lending. They're doing that kind of stuff. They wanted more cash. So they're ready to get rid of the properties. And I think they owner financed because they still wanted income from the properties, but they still sold them to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point, is some follow up there.
Yeah. And people want to do business or transactions with people that they trust.
Yeah.
And I think that was the key piece there. They trusted me at that point.
Yeah.
And then they knew that they had made a bad decision with their retirement funds, and they didn't want to risk that on properties 2 and 3. So they wanted to go ahead and get out of all of that so they could have at least something from the retirement.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So some takeaways for me were your willingness to take action in spite of not fully understanding how to do all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And you did that at every stage, because you don't know that you're writing letters to people that are either interested in selling their house, or you're also writing a letter where you're calling out some sort of issue with the person's house, which I would initially have been like, that's insulting.
Yeah.
But you're just stating some facts about it, and those people probably just aren't going to call you. But then there are other people that are going to be like, yeah, you're right. And this guy looked at my actual house. He hand wrote me a letter. I mean, it's not, any of the other 50 letters that I get every month.
Yeah.
So you probably got more phone calls as a percentage of the notes that you sent out because of that strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The financing part is, I think, would be scary. Like if I had not known exactly where the money was going to come from for my first deal before I had put it together, that would have been nerve-wracking for me because I would have just been worried that I wasn't going to be able to come up with funding.
Yeah.
But you just knew, I've got family and friends that'll, if I find a good enough deal, I can take this thing down with them.
Yeah, the other piece, Brandon, was in the back of my mind, like as a backup strategy, I knew if it was a deal, I could go and bring in somebody as a partner.
Yeah,
if I didn't have the family or the friends willing to lend me the money, I knew if it was a deal, I could say, hey, I've got this deal. Would you go in with me? Would you help me fund it? Would you be, joint venture on it? So that was kind of the I guess the subliminal piece in the back of my mind. I did have another option if I couldn't find the money. I knew I could get somebody else involved.
Okay. All right. So that's good. So you'd already started building a bit of a network as well inside of RIN. You've been getting some education, but I think you're right. Even if you didn't have any networking at all, but you just went one night and you just stood up at the beginning, sometimes they'll do like the deals things where you can get up in the front and share. And you literally just said, I've got a deal and I'm looking to fund it. Here's the numbers.
Yeah.
And you're like, I think this is what I've got. I'm pretty sure. And you're not like some just ego driven, like I'm going to knock it out of the park type of person. I guarantee you have people that will walk up and be willing to potentially take a look at that for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I feel like this has been a good, I've rabbit trailed a bunch on this one as far as making you kind of dive into more details. So rather than go another 45 minutes, we're getting closer and closer to the border. So I feel like we should call it quits for this episode, and then we'll do my deal for the next one.
Nice.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening to the Nashville Money Guys podcast YouTube channel. If you are interested in taking a look at our services and products, NashvilleMoneyGuys.com. We're a hard money lender that basically is asset based. We don't care about you. We care about the asset that you have under contract and are looking to flip. Based out of the southeastern part of the United States, we're kind of serving that area for right now. This is my buddy Josh Braun. We're gonna go hopefully catch a whole bunch of fish and maybe kill a bear or two.
We are. It's done.
Thank you for watching.
See you guys.